Happy New Year! 2025 is here. It's 2025 today. Well, it's not. I'm filming this and it's 2024. And I'm in my pyjamas. Normally for these best books of the year videos, I'm a bit glammed up because I'm normally heading out. Normally to sit in someone's house, but I've normally at least put a bra on. I have not got a bra on. I'm actually a little bit high as well. Let's come down. So you can see those that non-bra action. But tonight, New Year's Eve, David and I are in. David isn't feeling very well. He's got some sort of achy all over, feeling a bit bug. So yeah, and we didn't have plans. So yeah, so we're staying in. Gonna watch a film, gonna do some reading, have a lovely time. But anyway, we're here to talk about my best books of 2024. I have collected here 10 books, and I've just realised they're in the order from 1 to 10, and I'm going to need them the opposite way around. So let me just do the logistics of that first. But yeah, we've got 10 books here that I'm going to be talking about. The best books that I read in 2025. 2024. 2025 hasn't happened yet. I've read 100 and... I don't know, I'm looking in there. I haven't even written it down. 154 books. I mean, maybe even 155 because I might finish one tonight in 2024. Not my bestest reading year that I can think of. Still read some corkers. And when I was, so normally when I'm thinking about these 2020 best books of whatever, whatever the year is, I'm like, oh yeah, that's definitely on it, that's definitely on it. And I often have sort of 8 and then think about what's going on, but I could only think of 4 that would definitely make it. And then I had to look back at what I'd read and stuff like that. But the 4 that I have read, the 10 that I've picked are all worthy books to be in here. And the top 4. Yeah, top 4 are top. Right, but anyway, let's start at 10. And I've got 3 of the books here on this list aren't here because I used my library loads this year, which was lovely. And 3 of my top 10 books are from the library. The first one is Heartstopper Volume 4 by Alice Oseman. I had a lovely day. I changed jobs earlier on this year, and when I left my old job, the first thing I did when I left my old job, the next day, I sat and I watched all of season 3 of Bridgerton, which was lovely, and interspersed each episode with a Heartstopper graphic novel. It was one of the best days ever. And I'd read Heartstopper 1 and 2 before, maybe 3? But I definitely hadn't read 4 and 5. 4 and 5 were both magnificent. The whole series is magnificent. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the hype. There's a Netflix series of it now, but it's a queer love story told in graphic novel form between 2 boys, Charlie and Nick. And it's lovely. And I'd read the first 2 before the series and then watched the series and loved it, and then thought I'm gonna find a time to read all of these. And they're all very sort of hopeful, but also dealing with the sort of like teenage struggles of what it's like to potentially find out you're queer, what it's like to negotiate queer relationships, all of this sort of stuff. Lovely, until you get to book 4, which is why it's one of my favourites from this year, because it really dealt with some pretty hardcore topics in a really sensitive and respectful way that means that teenagers feel seen, and as an adult reading it, I can think, oh god, these poor teenagers that are going through this. So it covers topics such as self-harm and eating disorders, as well as anxiety and what that might be like for the people surrounding you, your family, your boyfriend, your friends, and how they might be feeling when you're at rock bottom almost. And in this book, Charlie, the character who is struggling with these topics, goes into a residential treatment area and sort of leaves his life on pause while his friends and boyfriend and family are all sort of carrying on. And yeah, they can visit him from time to time, but they can't have as much contact with him as they ordinarily would. And it was just dealt with so beautifully, and I cried literally from beginning to end of the book. And they also touched on it in the more recent series of Heartstopper as well, and I feel like that was covered really well as well. But yeah, the whole series is fantastic, but book 4 I think is a special place because it was so sensitively and sensibly and beautifully done. I believe book 6 is coming out this year. It was supposed to be 5 volumes, but there's going to be 6, so I'm looking forward to the 5th volume coming out. No, I've read the 5th volume. I'm looking forward to the 6th volume coming out. Book 9 is one that I haven't finished in the sort of traditional sense, but it's a book that's had a big part of me in 2024, and potentially if you've been watching my Friday reading vlogs, has also had a big part of you as well, and that's The Sweet Roasting Tin by Rukmini Iyer. I am a massive fan of Rukmini's cookbooks. The green, I was going to call it the Green Bible, that's what I call it. The Green Roasting Tin is my favourite cookbook of all time, and I have pressed that upon many people and bought that for many people and recommended it to many people. And there's a whole host of roasting tin books, and this was the sweet roasting tin. And I've always sort of told myself that, oh, you're not very good at baking, you're not very good at baking, and I haven't really had that much success in baking. I'm very good at cooking and following a recipe and making things come out lovely, and getting better actually at sort of making my own recipes up and maybe having a look in the fridge and thinking, oh, I could do this and I could do that. But baking had always been something that sort of escaped me a little bit, and when I had cooked things, the results hadn't always been as I'd hoped. And I sort of said to myself, I'm going to cook my way through this book this year, and I almost did. I mean, I got through a really, like, if you look at it there, all of these folded over pages are ones that I made, and I started from the beginning. The last thing I made was maple pecan flapjacks, and I made them the day before Christmas Eve. I do still have the stuff to make cranberry almond flapjacks and chocolate lemon mascarpone cheesecake, so I will do that, but I didn't finish it. However, I had such a lovely time cooking from this and including that in my Friday reading vlogs. It's been really nice. I've been given sort of gifts of cakes and loaves and muffins and stuff to people as birthday gifts, which have been lovely. When I started my new job, I was able to sort of bring loads of muffins with me and be like, hey, like me. these are muffins. And yeah, we've had a great year of doing it, and I really feel like my baking has definitely improved. And I almost feel like, because I've got a sort of another cooking plan for Friday reading vlogs for next year, and I feel like I'll miss these guys, and I'll miss making cupcakes and muffins and having, and because I sort of followed it chapter by chapter, I'd have like 6 weeks where I'd just be making loaf tin cakes, 6 weeks where I'd just be doing muffins, 6 weeks where I'd be doing bread and butter puddings and things like that. So I feel like I got better at those things because I was making them more and more. And there's things in here that I've made like 5 or 6 times now, particularly the savoury muffins. The halloumi muffins are delicious, as well as, oh, there's some chocolate muffins that David really, really loves. And also this is, as what happens with my favourite cookbooks is that it gets absolutely bashed to bits and like drenched in stuff. Black pepper cheddar and sage muffins, except I replaced the sage with basil. I'm not mad on sage anyway, and the first time I made them they didn't have sage in the shop, so I made them with basil and they were lovely. Goat's cheese, fig and basil muffins, so like the savoury muffins have been real faves of mine. Roasted tomato, ricotta and thyme muffins, also lovely. The sad fact of the matter is that I didn't get to the bread chapter, which has got lots of lovely savoury bits, including stuffed rosemary and roasted garlic dough balls, a camembert dipping wheel, spiced focaccia with roasted butternut squash. So I will return to this. I will return and I will complete some of the bread recipes in there. But yeah, it's been a wonderful year with Rukmini and the sweet roasting tin, and I've had a great time with it, and hopefully if you've been following my Friday reading vlogs, you've enjoyed me doing that as well. So there we go. Next up, so books 8 and 7 are both similar books. I'll talk about 8 first because I've got it here, and that's the order that it goes in, and that's The Raven's Nest by Sarah Thomas, An Icelandic Journey Through Light and Darkness. I read 8 years ago, maybe even more. It was definitely while I was doing BookTube. I read Sarah Moss's Strangers in Iceland, Names for the Sea, and that is a book about Sarah, a non-fiction book about Sarah and her husband and their 2 children relocating to Reykjavik for a year, as Sarah's got a job working at the university there. And I love that book, and I love them talking about their life here compared to their life in Kent, which is where I live, their life in Reykjavik compared to their life in Kent, which is where I live, and all the sort of changes, what the supermarkets are like, what the school system's like, what it's like to go shopping, where you get a car from, no one buys anything secondhand, blah, 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 like all of that sort of stuff. I loved it, and I've forever been searching for a book like that. Well, this year I found it, and that was The Raven's Nest. So this follows another Sarah. All the Sarahs are moving to Iceland, and her relocation to Iceland after she works a summer job and meets her husband there, and she, yeah, and then it's about her relocating to Iceland. So you find out very much at the beginning of the book that her and her husband's marriage doesn't make it. So whilst you're loving the lovely stuff, all about the environment, all about the food, all about the traditions, all about what it's like to get sort of, they had in this compared to the other book was that she was marrying into an Icelandic family, so getting to grips with the language and with making relationships with people who had no sort of knowledge of what her life was like living in the UK and stuff like that. But it's all sort of like marching towards this really sad fact that you know that this relationship isn't going to last. They are friends and it's all fine. Well, it's not fine because they're not still married, but like they're friends and they're both as happy as they can be. But yeah, you were sort of marching towards that. But that, it sort of put upon it a really beautiful, like you were looking down into like at someone's life. It felt really beautiful and special and very well, what's the word, like a beautiful garden that had been maintained. What am I trying to say? That, like that sort of thing, like and you were looking back in the past. But yeah, I really love this. I particularly love the stuff about language, and yeah, it's great. If you love well, if you've read this, then definitely read Strangers in Iceland, Names for the Sea. If you've read that, then definitely read this because you will love them. I gave this 5 stars. I really loved it. The next one, as I said, is one that I got from, I've been doing a lot of reading from the library, and that was A Woman in the Polar Night. I've forgotten the name of the person. It might be called Christian Rutter. Let's have a look. It is Christian Ritter, sorry. And this book is written a long time ago. This was written in 1933, and it's about Christiane and her winter in the polar night, and she's living in a small like shack or like lodge with her husband and somebody who he is working with, and what it's like for her as a woman and them leaving for long periods of time to do fishing trips and things like that. Although written in 1933, it's also accompanied by the most beautiful little pencil sketches of like Arctic foxes and terns and lovely scenery and all of this sort of stuff. Like, I really loved all that in it. But it felt so modern, considering it was written in 1933. I remember writing in my review that there's parts of it where I think, like, I almost feel like she's going to say, and then I turned on Instagram and I took a photo of that and put it on Instagram, because it feels really like it felt timeless in many ways, because it didn't feel like it was written at that time. And yeah, I really loved it, and just in the same way that if you love The Raven's Nest, I think you would love this too. But yeah, any other recommendations for books about women relocating to preferably Scandinavian countries? I've got one that I'm going to read this summer called Island Summers by Tilly Colm Seymour. Can she get it down? No, it's wedged in, but I'm going to read that, and that's about, maybe I can get it down. Yes, I can. There we go. And this is about Tilly going and spending summer on a small island off the coast of Norway, and then that's about her returning to that island. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to reading that. But any more books like that sort of thing, there's no way I'm going to get that back in. I'm just going to have to pop it up the top. Would very much like to hear. Next up is a Daphne du Maurier book. Always a joy when there's a Daphne du Maurier book on the best books of the year. Hasn't happened for a few years yet, but it did happen this year, and that was The House on the Strand by Daphne du Maurier. I very much enjoyed this. It's, again, a book that was written a while ago that feels super modern. Let me have a look and see when it was written. One moment. Very scientific, like sci-fi. Like sci-fi, guys. 1969 it was written, and it's about a young sort of easily influenced young chap called Dick Young, and he has made friends with a professor who he very much sort of hero worships. And this professor says to him, oh, would you take a couple of these potions for me? And I just want to observe you and see what happens when you take these potions. Well, when Dick takes these potions, it transports him back to the same place that he is in Cornwall, but in the 14th century. So very quickly, Dick becomes addicted to both the taking the potions and the lives of the people that are back in the 14th century. It's a very interesting sort of way that it happens, because obviously the buildings that were existing in the 14th century don't necessarily exist in this time. We don't find out what time it is, but the time that Dick is in now. So he might take a bit of potion, and then when he returns, he might be in the middle of a field in the 14th century, but when he returns, he's right next to a train line, for example. It was very interesting. I really liked his obsession with the lives of people in the 14th century, and it sort of like reminded me of maybe watching reality TV or something like that, because that's how into it he was, and it was sort of taking over his life, and he was thinking about them all the time. And like I said, addiction of taking these potions, and then what happens. But yeah, very interesting. I can't give you much more than that because the rest of the plot is spoilers, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. I also read The Parasites by Daphne du Maurier this year and really enjoyed that as well. But all of her books are so different, and this is so wildly different to The Parasites, which I read, and so wildly different to My Cousin Rachel, which I also read this year. So yeah, just hats off to you, Daphne. I'm glad I named my cat after you. Very, very good. The next one is one that I also got out from the library, and that's Speak Okinawa by Elizabeth Brinney. Let's have a look and get her full names. Authors, I'm not... Speak Okinawa. Elizabeth Mickey Breener, sorry. And this is a memoir of Elizabeth's life from a Japanese mother from the very small sort of rural island of Okinawa in Japan, which when I looked on a map I couldn't believe how far away Okinawa was from the rest of Japan, and then her father, who was a Vietnam veteran, and it's about her relationship with her mother. The majority of the book is about her relationship with her mother and what her mother's upbringing was like in Okinawa, and what the transition of moving to the USA was like for her, and how Elizabeth never really bonded with her mother because they just didn't have any common ground, and what that was like, and feelings of shame relating to your mother, and feelings of embarrassment and sort of duty relating to her. And I found it very, very interesting and very, very honest, because a lot of the things she was admitting to were not particularly nice things. I think it was quite a brave thing to do, to admit that, like, you look at your mother sometimes and hate her because for reasons that were beyond your mother's control. And yeah, I found it very, very interesting, and like I said, honest, and the writing was wonderful, and I'm so pleased I read it. I think I heard about it on Mercedes' channel. Maybe she was talking about books that she was going to read, but yeah, I had a wonderful time reading it. And again, memoirs with women at the centre of it. Very, very much enjoyed it. So there we go, another one. Then we're into the top 4, guys, and these are the ones that I said were the top 4 were the top 4. The first one is The House Opposite by Barbara Noble. It reminded me a lot of the Cazalet Chronicles, which were my favourite books of 2023, and followed a family and their lives like around the Second World War. Well, this does the same thing, and this is following Elizabeth Simpson. And a lot of this is based on Barbara Noble's own experiences whilst working as a, what are they called? The air raid wardens during the Blitz. So yeah, this is following Elizabeth Simpson, who's having an affair with her married boss. And it's her relationship, like what her life's like when she's in the office, and what her life's like when she's at home, and a situation that involves her having to go and spend some time at her boss's rural house in Cornwall, I believe it is. In Cornwall? I can't remember. And then also you're following her neighbour who lives in the house opposite, and his life, and he works as an air raid warden, and his sort of feelings. And there's also a bit of gay representation in here, which is lovely for a book that was written in 1940s. Yes, please. And yeah, and then him ending up also in Cornwall. I believe it's Cornwall. And what that's like when they reconvene there, and not really knowing one another very much, but getting to know one another. And yeah, I loved it. It was great. I'm told there is a Barbara Noble book published in Persephone Books, so I need to find that out, because I thought the writing was great, and I just loved it. I just really, really loved it. I couldn't put it down. I already feel like this is one that I could pick up again and have a lovely time with, because I very much enjoyed it. But here we go. The House Opposite by Barbara Noble. Top 3 alert! And this is the last fiction book in the top 10. So the top 2 are non-fictions. And this is Pet by Catherine Chidgey, which I was only saying to my husband David yesterday, I really think you should read this. It's really, really good. It's really, really good. And we read this for Patreon Book Club and had a lovely time reading it for Patreon Book Club. The theme for that month was books I think will be good. And this was a book that I thought would be good. It's very, very good. So this follows 12-year-old Justine, who is in school, and she has a new teacher, and she's very keen to become this new teacher's pet. And this new teacher sort of takes it in turns to make these pupils, these students, her pets, and gets them to do special jobs for her, and sort of rewards them with praise and all sorts. And this Justine is desperate to become the pet of, I can't even remember her name, Mrs. Price. And Justine gets her wish and she becomes Mrs. Price's pet. And then, I can't go into any more detail because the plot is so tasty and delicious, but this pen that is here is a really big plot point. And this front cover is fantastic because once you've read the book, you're like, oh yeah, this all makes a lot of sense. But yeah, it's written in a really great literary thriller style. I loved it all unraveling as it was unraveling. I loved it that it was from a child's point of view. That was really thrilling to me as well. And just the desperation of her, how much she wanted to be on Mrs. Price's good side, was just such a great thing to read and to witness and to go along for the ride for. I really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, this is a real gripper, a real gripper, and I'm very, very keen for David to read it. Catherine Chidgey, I've read Remote Sympathy by that author. This is another one where the book that I read, Remote Sympathy, I couldn't believe that it was the same author that had written this, such different stuff. And then I've got another one called The Axeman's Carnival that I saw Mercedes talking about, second mention of Mercedes, that I bought earlier this year, and I'm going to read that because she loved that book and gave that a whole dedicated review, and I'll be there for that. So there we go. So the next two, as I said, are now non-fiction books, and number 2 is Reach for the Stars by Michael Cragg. This is a decade of pop music between 1996 and 2006. Fame, fallout, and pop's final party. Now, I'll go into this and say, you're not going to find the most beautiful writing you've ever experienced here. You're going to find this a lot like Heat magazine in that particular decade. But I had such a wonderful time reading this and going on sort of like massive YouTube deep dives into Pop Stars The Rivals and watching back music videos from the Spice Girls and Atomic Kitten and Steps and listening to things that were from that decade. And there's a real deep dive into pop. That was my decade. So 1996 I was 10 and 2006 I was 20. So it's a real you're a completely different person by the end of that decade, but like I remember music so vividly in that time because I was into the really popular pop music, and that's what this follows. And it's got interviews, it draws on interviews that have previously been done with people of that era. There's a whole chapter devoted to the Spice Girls with bits from different interviews that they've done, and then there's some interviews that have been done for this book. But yeah, it's just a really good fun thing, and I've got a sort of interest in this. So if you're of my age and you love pop music, then you will also love this. It was really good. And yeah, and then like I said, deep dives into Pop Stars The Rivals, and I was just looking at stuff that I'd completely forgotten about and was like, oh my god, I loved that song, or I loved that band, and some unmentionable some bands in here that I'd completely forgotten about. And yeah, really good fun. So hopefully you will also find that good fun. And then my top book of 2024, number 1. I've already mentioned this a few times that this is number 1, so this may not come as much of a surprise to you, but it's Nigel Slater's book that came out this year, 1,000 Feasts. Not only being an absolutely beautiful piece of art, look at it, gorgeous. The bits in here are lovely. I'm a big Nigel Slater fan. We had a reading from Nigel Slater, not himself. My cousin did a reading from a Nigel Slater cookbook on our wedding day, which was lovely. The Christmas Chronicles, his book is something that I read every single year and revisit, and it's one of my favourite books. So when this was coming out, I thought, yeah, this is going to be for me. And now this is different to sort of other Nigel stuff I've read because there's no recipes included in here. But each sort of section, you might start, so for example, here we go. So you might start with dumplings in an alley in Seoul in South Korea, and then you've got this beautiful, I mean, let me just read you the first paragraph of that little excerpt. At the far end of the alleyway, clouds of steam billow like breath from a dragon. I walk over cigarette ends and past dead plants and duck under grubby washing, wincing at the sinister smelling doorways and puddles of what I very much doubt is rainwater. His writing is so transformative, and he spends a lot of time in places like Korea and Japan, also Scandinavia, and there's so many excerpts from his sort of notebooks and his diaries over the years. So you're reading that, and then you might stumble upon a lovely bit about a notepad shop that he really likes, or there's a whole chapter designated to brushes that he uses to decorate his house, which were just lovely. And it's just so gentle and lovely, and I'm not somebody who wishes to travel very much. This for me is how I like to experience travel, from someone who can write beautifully and likes to eat in different places and likes lovely scenery and can describe that perfectly for me. This was it, and it was so lovely. This would make a lovely gift. I know we're past Christmas, but this would make a beautiful gift for people who like food writing, who like travel writing, who like brushes to clean your house with. It's just a really special, lovely thing, and it's sort of set out into sections. The first section is about his travels, then he's got sections about home, and then sections about his garden, and yeah, there's just so much to love in here. And it was, like I said, gentle and quiet and special, and I felt completely looked after the whole time. This is going to be another one of his that I revisit all the time. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So there we go. My 10 favourite books of 2024. Let me know what your favourite books of 2024 was. Would love to hear. If any of these feature, doubly excited to hear. And yeah, Happy New Year to everybody. And oh, last thing I was going to say, I've started tracking my reading on Storygraph. So if you're on Storygraph, do go over and follow me, Lauren and the Books, over on my next door neighbour, my above neighbour's just fallen out the bed, so excited. Lauren and the Books over on Storygraph, and yeah, I'm going to track my reading over there this year, as well as doing it in my normal notebook. Happy New Year, see you all again soon. Bye! What did Emma say?
Just the two of us.
Oh!
Just a little plop on there, New Year's.
Can you take a little photo of me with my favourite books?